The concept of the Dark Universe was Universal Pictures' ambitious attempt to modernize and franchise their classic monster movies from way back in the day. Positioned as a cinematic universe akin to the MCU, the Dark Universe aimed to interweave reimagined stories of iconic creatures like Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman. On paper, this concept could totally work. After all, the classic Universal monster movies were debatably the first ever cinematic universe, where individual monsters were established in solo films, only for them to later cross over with one another. This could have been a unique take on characters that audiences haven't seen for nearly a century. However, it was dead on arrival, with 2017's The Mummy starring Tom Cruise, serving as both its birth and its death. There's a famous saying that I've heard time and time again throughout my life: you never get a second chance to make a first impression, and it's true. The very first look at this dark universe came in the form of a trailer for its first installment, The Mummy. However, the wrong trailer was uploaded to YouTube. IMAX posted it with the wrong audio track. Most of the music and sound effects were muted, and all you could really hear was dialogue and the sound of Tom Cruise grunting. This already made the Dark Universe a laughingstock, but it somehow managed to get even worse. Before The Mummy even premiered, Universal released this super prestigious and glitzy press announcement, complete with a high-profile photo shoot featuring Russell Crowe, Johnny Depp, Javier Bardem, Tom Cruise, and Sofia Boutella. These stars were crowned as the cornerstone figures of the franchise, with Johnny Depp being slated to play the Invisible Man. There was also the bold unveiling of the Dark Universe logo, as though history had already been written and The Mummy was going to be a surefire hit no matter what. The problem, though, is that the studio put marketing and franchise building ahead of storytelling and film quality. This approach ignored the deeper legacy that Universal had with its monster films. In the 30s and 40s, Universal's horror films defined the genre. These were high-quality movies that made enduring icons. These movies thrived not just because of their creatures, but because they tapped into universal human fears of the unknown, of scientific hubris, of losing one's humanity. Each film stood on its own as a distinct artistic vision. That independence was part of their strength. Reimagining these monsters required more than just hiring high-profile actors and making up glossy logos. It required a deep amount of respect for what made these stories last nearly a century. Meanwhile, Universal's modern approach completely skipped the slow groundwork necessary for building a franchise. The MCU succeeded because it started small, focusing on standalone narratives with Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America, before weaving them together into a larger mythos. Marvel earned its audience's trust through consistent storytelling and character development. Universal, however, assumed success would come simply from brand recognition and star power. They were betting on the cultural cachet of their monsters and their actors without proving that they could tell compelling stories with them. This impatience is what became their undoing. Directed by Alex Kurtzman, The Mummy was a tonal mess. It struggled to balance horror, action, and comedy, often undercutting moments of tension with awkward humor. Worse, it wasn't clear what kind of film it wanted to be. Was it a pulpy adventure in the vein of Indiana Jones that bafflingly had the terrorist organization ISIS as a secondary antagonist? Or was it a horror film evoking Universal's classic monster roots? Or was it a modern-day superhero origin story where Tom Cruise is set up as the paranormal Iron Man of this universe? The answer seemed to be all of the above, and the result was a muddled, inconsistent experience. Tom Cruise's heavy influence on the production only compounded these issues. Reports suggest that Cruise exerted significant creative control, reshaping the film to highlight him being an action hero. The result was a movie that centered on Cruise's character at the expense of, The Mummy, the name of the movie. What could have been a chilling and atmospheric horror film instead became an action blockbuster that reduced the titular mummy to a supporting role. Yes, the Brendan Fraser movies existed, but the main focus of that was still the mummy. Sofia Boutella's version of the character had potential as a tragic, terrifying figure, perhaps drawing on ancient mythologies and the horror of being trapped between life and death. But this was sidelined for generic action set pieces that would fit much better in a Mission Impossible movie. In doing so, The Mummy missed an opportunity to create a fresh and compelling monster narrative. One of The Mummy's most glaring flaws was its blatant obsession with setting up future films. Russell Crowe's Dr. Jekyll, intended as the Nick Fury-esque figure of the Dark Universe, was awkwardly shoehorned into the plot. Prodigium, the monster hunting organization that he led, served as little more than exposition for future installments. It completely derails the film so that Tom Cruise and Russell Crowe can shove exposition down the audience's throat. Like, I'm serious, the movie just stops halfway through and we get this random, interlude where Tom Cruise and Russell Crowe just walk around this building, and it's completely out of nowhere. Rather than focusing on a self-contained story, The Mummy became a glorified prologue, concerned more with teasing what was to come than delivering a compelling narrative. Dr. Jekyll's inclusion was not only clumsy, but undermined any tension that the film built. Why should audiences invest in the current story when the film itself seems way more invested in hypothetical future ones? So it's safe to say that this approach backfired. Audiences were given no reason to invest in the larger universe because the foundational movie failed to engage them. There was no compelling hook, no distinct vision. Instead, it felt like a corporate product crafted by committee, designed to serve brand synergy rather than storytelling. The failure wasn't just in The Mummy as a film, but in how it embodied every mistake a studio could possibly make when chasing the franchise model, to the point of it feeling satirical, like a modern-day Spinal Tap.
If you can see, the numbers all go to 11. Look, right across the board.
It mistook surface-level trappings of a universe with shared characters, connective tissue for the actual heart of one. Strong standalone stories that resonate with audiences. Critics hated The Mummy for its uneven tone, lackluster writing, and convoluted plot, though it managed a decent global box office return and just barely broke even, largely buoyed by Cruise's international star power. More importantly, it failed to excite audiences about the future of the Dark Universe. Without an engaging, coherent starting point, any dreams of a larger franchise collapsed under their own weight. Behind the scenes, turmoil brewed. Alex Kurtzman, the would-be architect of the universe, distanced himself from the franchise. Planned projects like Bride of Frankenstein, because, it makes total sense to do Bride of Frankenstein before Frankenstein, as well as The Invisible Man, were quietly shelved and cancelled. Universal's dream of an interconnected monster universe crumbled almost overnight. The studio's attempts to secure directors and writers for future films failed. Part of this was because it became clear that there was no creative direction beyond corporate ambition. Ironically, the Dark Universe's best legacy came from its ashes. In 2020, The Invisible Man came out, and it proved that Universal's monsters could thrive not as mega-budget franchise films, but as smaller director-driven projects, focused on strong narratives and thematic depth, and most importantly, horror. These are horror movies. Why are you trying to make them superhero movies? I don't get it. The Invisible Man succeeded by being intimate, terrifying, and thoughtful. Everything that The Mummy was not. The failure of the Dark Universe is a cautionary tale about putting the cart before the horse. Universes aren't built on logos, star power, or press releases. They're forged through compelling storytelling, memorable characters, and a patient audience-first approach. Universal learned that lesson the hard way. But there's also a broader industry lesson here. Hollywood's obsession with shared universes overlooks the simple fact that audiences care about good stories first and foremost. The allure of interconnected narratives is secondary to the strength of the initial chapters. If the Dark Universe had focused on telling one great monster story first, one that respected the horror roots of its icons while offering fresh creative perspectives, it could have worked. Instead, it became a franchise that failed to justify its own existence. A franchise with one movie. I think that era of Hollywood will be remembered for its bizarre obsession with cinematic universes. It felt like every other week there was a new cinematic universe being announced. Ghostbusters, King Arthur, and the DCEU all crashed and burned. Ironically enough, the only two cinematic universes that are still turning out a profit at the box office are the MCU and the Monsterverse. Thankfully, that trend of everything needing to be a part of a cinematic universe is starting to die down, with the new trend being this weird appropriation of indie movies. Like how Thunderbolts, the upcoming Marvel movie, is being marketed as an indie film, even though it's not by any stretch of the word. I don't know, maybe that's a topic for another day. But for now, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching. I'm Cole McCormick. This is Firewood Media. Consider becoming a member to support the channel. It's kind of like Patreon, but it's right here on YouTube. For $1.99 a month, you can support the channel by seeing these videos way before they're released to the public. You also get member shoutouts and your name featured as an executive producer in all of our film projects. Yes, your name gets to be in the credits of a real movie. You don't have to if you don't want to. It's an extra perk for anyone that wants to support the channel while getting some unique content on the side. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.